Ooh. I'm never sure at the start of these how to confirm is it up or not. As the LinkedIn API isn't very good. So what
No.
I've taken to doing is doing a mirror on Twitch at the same time.
Oh,
That is mostly just for me to debug it.
fair enough. And sometimes it takes a few minutes to for the live to kick in, I think, doesn't it? It can take a couple of minutes.
Oh yeah, very much. But it looks like we're up, and it looks like everything is great. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. Should be a bit of a fun conversation about building inclusive recruitment pipelines with regards to neurodivergence and all things. But before we jump into that, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Cherry Swayne. I run a recruitment business called Above and Beyond Recruitment. We launched about just over a year ago. We had our 1-year birthday a couple of weeks ago. And the space that we kind of focus on is positive impact tech. So working with early stage startups, anything from kind of 2 co-founders or one founder and no one else, and then working with them kind of through that funding and growth journey, kind of up to sort of scale up small SME type level. So yeah, and businesses that are focused on kind of solving the problem of climate change in some way. And within that, I recruit software engineers and product teams primarily. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I've been doing it for 15 years, and within that, sort of the topics of diversity and inclusion have been of interest to me for a long time. But recently, really over the last sort of year to 18 months, I've started to get really passionate about kind of building not just good working environments, but really good hiring processes to get the best out of everybody. And that's how you and I kind of met, wasn't it, Jamie? Back and forth about that on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, it's always great to have discussions with people also interested in just making things better for everyone, as there's no point just doing the same thing each time, same thing, different way, and expecting the unicorns to come out the woodwork. If
Yeah.
we want to find the best people and we want to provide the best experience for them, let's make a damn difference.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And I think I love what you've been doing because I mean, I think historically recruitment has been we're a company, we want to hire, this is what we want, and this is how we're going to assess you. And everybody had to fit in that mold, whether it worked for them or didn't. And I feel like recruitment processes, interview processes often felt like the person being interviewed felt like they were going to be caught out, rather than actually this is a conversation between 2 people and we want to get the best out of that person to find out if they can do this job or not. There's not enough of that. But that's where you and I kind of started a bit of back and forth, wasn't it? Because you're doing that really differently where you are. And I love it. I love what you guys are doing. Talk about
Yeah,
that.
it's really fun. So what we've started doing is issuing one pages to our candidates, just saying, "Hey, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. This is some examples of questions you might get, just to prepare yourselves." As my personal philosophy is, if we go into the recruitment process with an ego or trying to prove something or asking questions as if to say, "Oh, I'm smart enough that I know the answer. Do you?" Then we've already failed. It's about being able to get the best out of the candidates and
Yeah.
give them the fairest experience to show off what they're doing.
Yeah. And I love that idea of giving people the questions before they come to the interview. Brilliant. Like, why not? And if you say that to some clients, they'll be like, well, yeah, because then they'll prepare an answer. You're like, yeah, and surely that's a good thing because it's still them preparing the answer. That's not cheating, is it? It's still what they would have said. They're just able to say it more eloquently and they're able to get their point across better because they haven't panicked on the spot and had to spend a couple of minutes trying to think of an example. What? Absolutely, why not do it that way? Have you found a real difference in how the conversation flows from doing that?
Oh, 100%. I wouldn't say so much from having the questions in front of them, although it definitely helps. But the biggest point of difference has just been the general comfort of candidates coming in. As in general, we add pictures of ourselves, sometimes being a bit silly, and we'll just write some personal notes that are from us demonstrating our personalities. So, as in to break down the wall of, okay, scary recruitment and the candidate. No, we're all passionate about what we do. That's why we're in the role and why you're applying to be in the role. Let's have some damn cool conversations about it.
Yeah, I love that you share pictures of yourselves and a bit about your personality. That's so important. So I think going into any interview, I mean, I identify as neurotypical, you know, and I find it nerve-wracking going into an interview where I don't know the person, I don't know their personality type, I don't know what they're going to be like. So if you are somebody that's neurodiverse, then that there is an additional pressure on that, isn't there? On what's this person going to be like? I'm not going to understand necessarily. Maybe you'll find it as easy to understand how they're reading me, how I'm reading them. I think if a lot of that stuff can be wiped out before they get onto the call, it just makes it so much better.
Oh, yeah. It's just how do we achieve that for them in the best way, which
Mm,
is something I've been playing with a lot recently about how do we mark what we want our candidates to be without being too biased towards a specific mindset, a specific
mm,
subset of people, without inadvertently writing, I want a white male in his early 20s. Just by putting typical personality traits, well, that might be stereotyping. How do we make it fair, diverse, and just give everyone the opportunity to thrive, even if they're in different ways of doing that? Do you have
yeah.
any thoughts on what we can do as interviewers to make things better for these candidates?
Oh, interesting. So I think, you know, what you've been doing there is brilliant. But I think it starts before that, even. I think it starts right from the what do we need this person to be and getting your expectations about that person right from the beginning. I think it can be really easy to fall into slightly lazy thinking about who's the person that's going to do this job. And you build that mold on, well, who did it before? You know, we've got this vacancy, Jeff's left, so we want another Jeff. So we write a job description for Jeff. And it's like, you don't need to do it that way. Let's think about the role and the function of that role in the business. And now Jeff's gone. Who else could do it? What key skills are really needed? And thinking outside the box around, you know, I think people just write almost without thinking, must be a good communicator. That is going to put off a whole sector, you know, of neurodiverse people that think, well, I'm not a great communicator. And you might not need to be to do that job. You're a data analyst. Do you have to be? Like, probably not. So it's rethinking some of the slightly lazy kind of things, tropes that you put into your job description without really thinking about them, to make it more attractive and more approachable as an opportunity for people. So I think it kind of starts there, and expectations around education, that kind of thing. But then once they kind of get into the interview, I think some of that stuff you've been doing around the prep work is crucial, making sure people come in as prepared as possible, and then giving them some options, I think, about how that interview journey is going to look, because there doesn't just have to be one path and we assess everybody on that same path, because that is not going to, you know, some people, for example, will feel really uncomfortable on a video interview as their first call and they would prefer a telephone interview. Other people don't like a telephone interview because they want to see the person they're speaking to. Why not give the choice? You know, it doesn't make any difference to the interviewer. So give people the choice. Which one of those options do they want? um and same with technical tests. You know, I recruit for a lot of software engineering roles, so there are always technical, or usually some form of technical assessment. And so often the client that I'm working with has a way that they want to do it. And yeah, it's just a question of, well, could we not have two ways, and let the candidate choose what they feel more comfortable with? It's that whole, do you do a live coding test, a live assessment where you put someone on the spot, or do you give someone a task to take away, prepare, and bring back to the interview? Well, it doesn't mean that one person is better than the other because one performs better in one set of, do you know what I mean? Like, somebody will do brilliantly, you know, on the spot and in person. Somebody else that's equally as good a software developer will completely clam up, freeze, not know what they're doing, and look like they haven't got a clue when actually they're brilliant. It's just the way you've assessed them is wrong for them. So I think having different options and letting the candidate choose is where it needs to go, I think.
Oh, it's just how do we achieve that? So what I'm thinking is, what does the absolute perfect look like if we had internal and external organizations both aligned? Cool, we want to do the best possible thing. What would that be? So right now, I'm almost thinking a menu type system where you've got
Mm,
course A, course B, course C, where course A is, oh, could you speak with our internal talent team? These
yeah,
are the different choices. Menu or course B, we want you to speak to a technical person and do some technical tests. What
yeah.
do you want to do? And
Let menu C,
uh,
please.
yeah, But I guess it's just how do we create those options and give the candidate the validation and acknowledgement that no matter which option they choose within the pipeline, they will be assessed fairly and equally. And also for ourselves as the interviewers, how can we put away our unconscious biases towards one of the single menu options that makes us think, yep, just because they chose option A, they're going to be a better candidate.
Yeah, and I think it's how you frame it, isn't it? I like the way you said there about having it as a menu of options. In my mind, I kind of think about it as like a choose your own adventure. I think I'd said that to you before, hadn't I? But like, go to page 27. I think the way it's framed currently, by and large, and there are some companies that, are trying to do some really great things around D&I. But the way it's often framed is, we accept applications from people of all backgrounds. Please let us know if you need us to make adjustments for you. That's really lovely, but you still feel like you're being othered. You still feel like, well, this is the normal process, and if I require anything different, then I'm requiring an adjustment. I'm still feel I'm being a burden in some way, or I'm being other to your standard process. And I think that in itself just doesn't feel very inclusive. So I think being able to design from the outset for each stage, okay, to hire this person, what do we need to know they're capable of doing? In order to know they're capable of doing those things, by what means do we need to have assessed them? What stages do they need to have gone through throughout the process? And then can we facilitate them perhaps doing those in different orders or in different manners? So it might be that they've got to talk with someone from the people team, they've got to talk with the hiring manager, and they've got to do an assessment. Well, maybe they could do that in a different order. If the standard order is, it might be somebody that wants to do the assessment before they talk to anyone. Fine. It might be somebody that, perhaps wants to talk to the people team first because that's who they had their first engagement with. And so their ice is already broken and they feel more comfortable. So they want to do that first. So I suppose just getting clear on what you need to get from somebody, and then let the candidate choose the way in which they do it and the order in which they do it.
That poses a really interesting question. Should the candidates be made aware of the choices to the process before application? So make it public. If you want to apply for this role, you will go through these pathways and you can choose your own adventure. Or should it be withheld and only given when the candidate has applied, so they don't just apply because they think, oh, if I choose option ABC, I can game the system?
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. But I suppose they wouldn't be able to necessarily game the system. I know what you're saying. Some people might be able to get further quicker by choosing a certain set of options or doing it in a certain order. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I don't know would be the honest answer. I suppose that would have to be down to the organisation and the nature of role and what volume of applicants they even get for that kind of a role. There'll be some positions where you get such a high volume of applicants that you need to perhaps minimise that a little bit. And there'll be other roles, like if you're recruiting for a senior software engineer or a data scientist or something like that, or a DevOps engineer, where it's so much harder to find those people in the first place that you're probably not going to suffer from that issue too much. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I also love the amount of information that some companies are now starting to put into the domain about them and how they work. I think that kind of puts a lot of minds at ease as well. So for example, companies that have really embraced Notion, and having a Notion board that basically gives a warts and all of their organization. I've seen somewhere there is a full breakdown of operating processes within the organization, their kind of beliefs and values as a company, all of that stuff is there and is documented and is shared in advance, and it's accessible for people before they apply, before they get to an interview. Because I think that's a lot of stuff that people have kind of inherent worries about and feel they can't it's things you feel you can't ask in an interview as well, right, that you'd want to know the answer to, but what is your policy around sickness leave or mental health support, or and you feel you can't ask that in an interview, but if that information was given in advance, you'd feel a lot more comfortable.
Oh, I guess that would very much drive diversity and inclusion as well, because there is definitely a subsect of people who would be a lot less comfortable asking for those things, as opposed to someone more outspoken who'd just say, hey, Cherry, could I just get the sickness policy for XYZ reason?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you just, it's historically, you'd never ask that in an interview, would you? How many sick days do you get a year? Managers like, well, you're never going to be here. But the world, the world is changing, right? And why shouldn't somebody know that? It's very, reasonable that somebody would want to know what support they would get in the event that they were unwell. So I think being able to sort of share that information and having that publicly available in advance, plus, and it's the language that's used around it as well. And I think, again, the world's changing on that. But I read a really interesting article a few days ago. It was, if you Google it, you'd find it really quickly. It was a neuro-divergence guide to hiring, and it was from her perspective. What does she believe would be a great process? And she said just that, but one of the things she talked about was a lot around the job descriptions and the written communications that go out, and making sure that the writing is clear, simple, and as it would be spoken, and none of this jargon that I think gets kind of peppered into job descriptions. And I think just making sure it's clear, and use of I liked what you said about having your pictures. She said use of pictures, use of icons, emojis, that kind of thing, to just make concepts more accessible.
Oh, and I also think having a range of ways the information is available is equally as important. Something I'm quite keen on trialing in the future is, alongside a written job description, have a short video job description with someone saying the exact same thing, or instead of issuing one page of PDF, having a 30-second video of, hey, I'm Jamie, we're going to be interviewing soon, and just providing the same resource in many different ways, as takes all sorts to take a cake. So are we doing them a disservice by just saying, yes, we've done this one thing, we are super diverse and inclusive, or do we need to consider how to expand on even that?
I love that. Yeah. And where would you put that? Would that be something you'd put up as a public resource that, they'd have a lot, a link to and could have a look at? Or would you literally send individually to each person a video and the text and the whole bulk?
Oh, I think that is the really interesting question. And it comes back to the one I asked you earlier about what should be public pre-process and what should be given to candidates in process.
Yeah.
As I guess the two options for video specifically is you can put them on a YouTube channel and the candidate can search them at their will, or you can put them on YouTube as unlisted and only give them the link as it transpires. But which way would get the best out of people? And interestingly, is that something we could measure? So without telling them, half of the candidates get it in advance, half of them don't, and just see, does progress differ any? Though that might be a little bit tricky with public resources. So
it would be hard to track who had actually seen them and then what impact that went on to have if you made them public. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, look, there's no getting away from any of this, that it's a hell of a lot more work for businesses, isn't it? It's very easy for them now to go, yeah, that person left, let's reuse, where's that job description from that folder that we wrote 4 years ago, let's wheel that one back out and we put everybody through this same process, right, done, easy. It is a hell of a lot more work to go back and pick the role apart, decide what really is necessary criterion is, and to really look at those job descriptions and completely rewrite them, make them more accessible, to have video versions of that job description, to choose different pathways, lay out those pathways and decide, how you would still assess those people equally if one had taken that path versus that path. There is a hell of a lot more required on the part of the organizations. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I think in all aspects of our lives, personally and professionally, as people that have a certain level of privilege, we do have to start getting just a little bit less bloody lazy, and amending the way we do things for other people. So I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But also, I think it would just bring so much benefit to organizations. It will make positions more attractive to a broader range of people, not just those that are neurodiverse, but other people from other groups, indeed to everybody, right? And it will get more out of people during the interview process. It'd be interesting to see how it affects ratios of success through the process, right? So yes, it may be that you get loads more people apply. You might get loads more people into the first stage of the interview process. Are you going to get more unsuitable people? I don't know. It's that interesting debate around how you open up the pipeline, but also to a broader range of people yet you don't find that you're spending so many more hours interviewing per hire, because that is an important metric to be on top of slightly.
Oh, that is an important one. And that line of thinking made me think something that's probably not the most politically correct. And I can't say I believe it myself, so I'm more playing the devil's avocado. But are there roles where being too diverse might not be to the benefit of the team? And in having something more narrowly scoped is to the benefit of the job description. If we're talking about a very specific niche in a very specific industry, maybe there is a specific type of individual who leans themselves towards that thing. So where does the line fall, and how open should we make things?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think you can't be all things to all people all of the time, of course. I think if you try to be, you can waste a lot of time. And I think in any realm of sort of marketing, especially in jobs and things, you've got to be clear about what you don't want as much as what you do want. But I suppose you just have to be careful that when you're assessing what you do and what you don't want and what will and what won't work, that you're doing it purely on the basis of capability to do the job and on nothing else. And it's where the and nothing else bit comes in that is the problem. Yeah, I get that. I do get that. And I do think, that there is a risk here in it creating a hell of a lot more work for organizations to put all of these pathways in place and to make this, rainbow utopia land of everything being accessible and inclusive to everybody, which is ultimately, where me, the optimist, would like the world to be. But also playing that off against commercial concerns and time and cost and amount of time spent in interviews and how you get that piece right. So it's just about making sure that you're clear on assessment criteria, I think, and being tight on that assessment criteria at each one of the stages. So you're not putting people through for the sake of putting people through, that you're inviting everybody to the table, but you're being clear about how to assess whether or not they remain at the table.
It would be really interesting to create a series of quantitative metrics to try and track those things, but adding metrics to anything people related, now that's a challenge and a half.
It is, yeah. And I bet there are some people sat in, in-house people teams and in-house talent teams solving these very problems and having these very conversations, and who probably got some really interesting answers to this stuff that they're working on. And I love watching what different companies are doing and the sort of different ideas that they're trialing and the impact that it's having. But yeah, I think from my perspective, just in terms of what I'm doing, I think I'm just trying to encourage companies to have those options at each stage as much as possible, even if it's just a case of, right, I'm putting an individual forward to you for first stage. I ask everybody, would you rather have a telephone call or a video interview? And I ask the candidate, what would you prefer? And then when you send them to the client, you can say, and this person would really prefer a video or a phone call. And then when it comes to the technical assessment, trying to encourage companies where possible to have a choice, a take home or an in-person technical interview, and then giving the candidate the choice. And then, but I mean, for the final stage, it's harder. It is harder for the final stage, but I suppose if somebody at least even gets to that final stage, then you've succeeded. If you've had a more diverse pipeline from the outset, you've lost fewer of them in transit, because you've made it more sort of accessible and amenable for them to get through the process. And then at that final stage, hopefully, if you've done that first bit right, you will have a more diverse range of people at final interview stage.
It's just such a broad and interesting topic. For the near term, I think the only thing we can do is individuals such as yourself and people like us having this conversation to try and drive it and try new things is great. But what should this space look like in 20, 30 years' time? Should we have a completely independent body, almost like Scrum organizations, for, yes, we can certify you in sustainable recruitment, or almost an audit practice, or what should it look like in 30 years' time?
And I think there are some companies trying to get in on that a bit, that are designing processes and ways of doing things. Whether or not they all go as far as a kind of certification or there being an industry-wide way of doing it, I think it's a topic where there are lots of different players, there are lots of different technologies, there are lots of different training and schools of thought around it. I don't think there is kind of a one that's winning out. And maybe it'll never get to that, because I mean, if you look at kind of psychometric assessments, there isn't just one. There are kind of 3 or 4 players, and you can be somebody that specializes in doing Myers-Briggs or something else. So I don't think we'll ever get to that point with it, but I definitely hope that it will get to, hopefully within the next 5 years, a point where the companies that aren't doing it this way look like the outliers, and that you have a wealth of information at your fingertips that you can access as a prospective employee, and you have a tailored, personalized recruitment journey that gets the best out of you, to really assess if you're the right person for the job or not.
Oh, 5 years is a ambitious timeline. Do you think
Is
it's
it?
achievable for the general market to move that way?
Yeah, well, look at what we've done in the last 2.
Yep,
Nobody worked
very
from
fair
home
point.
2.5 years ago, or there were some industries. I mean, if I can speak for the recruitment industry, 2.5 years ago, are we 2.5 years in yet? Yeah, 2.5 years ago, January 2020, if you had gone to your boss and said, I'm going to work from home 3 days a week, they'd have said, probably in a lot of recruitment industry, over my dead body, are you going to go and work at home 3 days a week? How will I know how many minutes you've been on the phone? How will I know how many sales calls you've made? And that was, for recruitment at least, that's been the industry. And now, you would be a real outlier as a company if you weren't letting your team work from home at least a couple of days a week. So look how far we've come. Appreciate that was a much more forced scenario. But I think we're making, I hope, I'm optimistic that we are making progress quicker on some of these things than we have done previously. But yeah, again, like I said, I'm an optimist.
Oh, I wish I could share your optimism, as I very much want the world to go that way. But I'm just thinking humans love to be lazy and regress towards the mean. So
Yes.
what can we do to try and drive that 5-year goal of, let's make those companies who don't an outlier? What actions do we, as you and I, but also the wider community, those listening and those we're connected to, what do we need to do to make this a reality?
Yeah, and then there are some key drivers on that, aren't there? I think there is cost. So it's, how can we find a way of doing this that isn't going to cost us, both in terms of time and money? So I think there's cost, there's ease. How easy is it for us to put this stuff in place? And then there's, hate to say it, shame, right? There's that everybody else is doing it, so we kind of should, or we're going to look bad. I think that's starting to happen on the sustainability piece. At least there aren't very many big corporates out there now that don't have some kind of goal or target, because even if they don't at board level intrinsically believe it's the right thing to do, all our competitors are, and if we don't, we look really bad. So there's kind of those 3 drivers that I think will push people down that way. Everybody else is doing it, we look bad if we don't. Let's find a way of doing it quickly, and let's find a way of doing it easily. And I think that there is a big tech market now for this kind of stuff, and you've got people like Applied are a good example, that can do this for you. I don't know how expensive they are, but I would imagine easily, and hopefully fairly cost effectively. So it minimizes the time to implement this kind of stuff, and hopefully doesn't cost too much. And okay, now we've ticked that box, we feel all right about it. So hopefully, even if for cynical reasons and cynical motives, I hope there's enough tech and progress being made out there that this stuff will start to take off.
Oh, I very much hope so. It'll be great to see what happens in the next few years, that's for sure. And I, for one, I'm going to be trying so many different things just to see what happens.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what you do next with your processes. You're really good at sharing it all on LinkedIn as well. So if anyone's watching this and doesn't already follow Jamie, follow him, because he's trailblazing in his own organization how recruitment's done. So
thank you for the shout out.
That's all right.
I think that just about brings us to a close for today. I'd like to say it's been wonderful having this conversation with you, and it's just great to try and think about what we as an industry can do better.
Definitely. I'm all for positive improvement.
Brilliant stuff. So thanks again, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.